Alrighty, and we're on.
We're on.
Uwee, how are ya?
Doing very well. Doing very well.
So I'm here. We're at Bankstown Fight Club.
Yep.
Bring that mic up a little bit closer for me. Yeah, yeah. If you talk right into it, it'll sound a little bit better for everyone.
That's what it does.
And we're at Bankstown Fight Club, and so I called your last fight against Kai Frenzy McKenzie, and you're on the mic with me commentating at the previous event.
Yes.
And then I was like, okay, we gotta hook up. We gotta sit down, have a bit of a conversation, because I feel like, there's a lot of things that I want to ask you about.
Fair enough. It's a pleasure to be with you, man.
And I suppose the first thing that I sort of want to touch upon is because, having been to quite a few of Huss's shows, and I always see, all the guys get together, they pray, and I always I want to sort of start this conversation off talking a little bit about faith.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's this thing about, I guess especially in today's society where people, they want to move towards this secular society and turn away from faith. And all they do is, I feel like in every human being we have this hole within us that can only be filled by believing in something.
That's true.
Right? And then what happens is that, when we say, oh, we want to move away from faith, we instead fill that hole with other things.
Yeah.
We feel that with different ideologies, or, we get involved in other things, and we try and use that to sort of distract us from this internalized feeling that we have, that we need to find this connection to something.
Definitely, man.
Right? So can we talk a little bit about, I guess your faith journey? I guess, from a family perspective, you guys obviously always grew up, in the faith.
Yep.
I guess, can you speak to, your parents, were they very strict in terms of how they wanted you guys to be brought up?
I wouldn't say they were very strict in terms of how they wanted to bring us up, but they always made sure that we did know of our faith, and we were aware of our faith, and that, instilled in us the importance of having that faith. So obviously we grew up as Muslims, and we grew up in the Sutherland Shire. So for a lot of us, for my older brothers especially, it was actually quite difficult for them because, they were viewed as different, and they were viewed as, outcasts and outsiders and whatever else. So I guess, for my parents, they still needed to have that balance where they were like, okay, we don't want these kids to feel like they're completely different, but they also need to have that connection to their faith. So yeah, I look, for me, I was in the Sutherland Shire until I was 8, and then we moved over to Greenacre from the Sutherland Shire, which was obviously a massive culture shock for me. And I went directly into a private school, which was an Islamic school as well. So that was my first sort of, where I was like, okay, this is what the Islamic religion is. I came to a school where I had only ever witnessed my mum wear the scarf. And I came to a school where all of these young girls who were in year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6 wearing headscarves at school. And that was massive for me. I was like, oh, why are these girls wearing headscarves? And obviously that was just something that they had to do at school, but when they went home, whether they wore it, whether they didn't, was I didn't know, but it was a bit of a culture shock for me. And then that was my first learning of the religion in terms of I learned how to speak, write and read Arabic, which is an important thing in our faith. Arabic is the language that the Quran was, that our holy book was revealed. So it's an important part of our faith to learn how to speak and how to write, how to read Arabic, just so that we can understand what has been revealed to us from God. So, yeah, definitely. Look, but my parents, what their role was, they just made sure that we were good people, and that was the main thing. They just wanted us to be good people and provide a good example for others that, okay, this is what a Muslim is. Okay, it's not what you see all over the news and what you see a lot of people talking about and the agendas that people have against us. Prove them wrong. That was a big thing for our parents.
Yeah. It's funny, a lot of the times when I speak about faith in different podcasts, I have people reach out to me and say, oh, Johnny, you sound like you're a Muslim.
Yeah.
Because, I guess I talk about this idea about God, being a creator.
definitely.
And irrespective of whatever you want to call him, you know, you can give him whatever name you like. However, you know, I think if you have to think about, you know, the fundamentals in terms of, like, say, objectively, the number one, right? You have to have the number one before you can have any other number. You know, you start with nothing, but there has to be something, right? And the smallest, no matter how small you break it down, you know, the first of anything, you know, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
That initial, whatever, the spark or energy or whatever you want to call it, right? There's a creator who has created this. And it's always very interesting, you know, when you, like, I guess the analogy that a friend shared with me was like, when you look at a painting, there's a painter, right? You look at all the things in the world that we create, somebody has created that, you know,
100%.
even your children, you know, there's two parents to create that.
Yeah.
Right. But before, you know, this universe could come into being, there has to be something that created it.
Definitely.
Right. And then it was funny because I had another friend who then goes, okay, but then what was before that? Right. Like, it's like, you can go down this pathway of, like, it never ends, but there has to be at one
point. It's a good
point,
question, but there is an answer to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to, and I think another, you know, thing that I always find interesting is that, especially in the fight game, you know, whether it's boxing, mixed martial arts, or anything like that, I always find that people who have this solid grounding in a faith or a higher power, it helps you cope with the highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that 1,000,000% because there's something that, like, for as a Muslim or, you know, as a person of faith, like, you need to understand that, you know, everything serves its purpose, and you need to realize that God does things for a reason. So once you can accept that, like, whether it be, like, you know, where you achieve something massive and you stay grounded in the fact that, okay, this was God's plan for me, you know, and at the same time, I know that God could have taken that away from me. So you're thankful. It's about gratitude to that higher power. So, you know, and then if you were to, you know, crumble in defeat or whatever else, like, it is what it is. You have to accept it. You have to realize that, okay, this is what God had written for me. So it allows you to get back on your horse rather than sort of, you know, dwell over the fact that you've lost and, okay, like, completely crumble. That's one thing that you don't want to happen. So I haven't tasted defeat as a professional, and hopefully I won't, but, you know, I know that if that is to happen, I know that it's not going to define me. I know that I'm going to be able to get past it because I'm going to realize that, okay, there's a reason why I took this loss, and, you know, okay, what do I need to work on, or what do I need to do, or what part of my life do I need to fix up in order for me to you know, achieve that success that I missed out on. So yeah, I can understand that.
It's funny, you know, especially, so I was in the automotive industry before, right? And when things are going good, you know, everybody's like, oh, it's me, you know, like I'm killing it, you know, I'm selling all these cars, or I'm doing all this because, you know, it's me, right? And then the moment you have a bad month, it was always like, oh, the market, it's the market, right? Like suddenly all those things that you're in control of that you could do so well, and then, you know, you have a bad month, oh, it's not my fault anymore, right?
You want to pin the blame.
One of the things that I do appreciate about the Abrahamic religion, so I guess, you know, whether it's Islam, whether it's Christianity or Judaism, there's like this thread of, like, and I always think about this, is that, you know, when we're growing up, we always think, like, it's us that is creating these great things, and, you know, we deserve all of these accolades and things like that. But one of the things that I really admire about thinking along those Abrahamic ways is that, you know, these are gifts that you're blessed with.
Definitely.
Right? That God has given you these particular gifts, and you can use these in this world however you see fit, right? But he's given you these gifts for a purpose. And in the same way that you're given these gifts, he can take it away as well.
100%.
Right? So in those times of suffering, or, like, you know, there's a word for hubris, right? Where you're like, you know, you think you're the best in the world or whatever, and then suddenly, you know, the rug gets pulled out from under you and you're facing this different kind of adversity. I'm sure we're going to talk about some of those other adversities in your life, because I know, you know, from the professional boxing side, maybe not so much, but, you know, family and all that sort of stuff, there's plenty there, right?
Definitely.
But I always find it to be one of those things where, like, when times are tough, there's two ways that people go, you know, especially when it comes to faith. There's a common theme that I always find when people are in tough times is that, you know, especially the ones that aren't as religious, but, you know, they're always praying to a God when times are tough, and they go, fuck, help me, you know? Yeah. But so I always find that to be a bit of a common thread. And one of the things that when I started thinking a lot about that, it's like, people only typically ask something of God when they're in real big trouble.
When they're in need.
Yeah. But then when times are good, you forget to talk to him, you forget to develop this relationship with him or her, whatever God is, right? But if you think about like that as your own parents, you can have parents, but you may not have a great relationship with them because you don't talk to them or you don't engage with them. And then it's like, if one day you were to go to your parents, hey, Dad, I need $5,000 for whatever reason. Your dad's, he's either going to give you one of two reactions. He's going to be like, well, son, like, you haven't talked to me for 20 years. You told me the last conversation we had, you told me you hate my guts and now you want money from me. Like, it could go down that way.
Yeah.
Or it could be that you've got a relationship with your dad where you're consistently telling him and thankful for everything that he's provided for you in life. And I guess, the way that I approach prayer is very, I wouldn't say it's as structured as the Islamic approach.
Yep.
But when I first started praying, it was like, I'd be in my car, as an example. I'd be driving home and I'd be like, God, thank you for a great day. And I'd just be listing the things that I was grateful for.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess, it's one of I think this is something that's probably quite misunderstood about, the Muslim faith is that, it seems like it's quite strict, you got to pray 5 times a day, you got to do all of these sorts of things. And I know, I guess I'm just asking in terms of your opinion and how it impacts your life, your approach to prayer, like how have you found that? Has it been something that's helped you throughout life or?
I think any type of structure in your life or any type of routine is good for you. So for us as Muslims, obviously we pray 5 times a day at a minimum. That's like the absolute minimum.
Yep.
So that's like no negotiation. You need to pray 5 times a day. I'm not saying that every Muslim does pray 5 times a day.
Yeah.
Because, while we believe religion is perfect, the people who follow religion aren't. So, we're human beings at the end of the day. But like for the 5 times a day, it's just being able to take out that time and just to stop like whatever it is that's going on in your life and to just be like, okay, this next 5 to 10 minutes is purely for God. So that includes having to make ablution, which is wudu in Arabic, which is like where we wash ourselves, purify ourselves before we start praying, and then actually getting ready for the prayer and, making sure that we get the prayer done. And obviously, look, it's not the easiest thing to completely block out everything that's happening.
Yeah.
Okay, because your mind still is working and your mind's still thinking. You might be thinking about something that, went on earlier or whatever it is. But it's also an opportunity to say to God, okay, look, I'm in your hands. Like, guide me or help me in this situation. And it's a perfect opportunity to ask God things because, while with the structure of prayer is that we're reading chapters from the Quran to start, and then we've got certain actions that we have to do. But like in the bottom action, which is called sajda, which is where we have our head on the floor, that's actually the perfect opportunity to speak to God and to say to God, like, hey, like okay, thank you for this, or God, I need your help with this, or whatever it is. And like, just that feeling of knowing that, okay, you can humble yourself and put your head on the floor and know that, okay, this is for God. Because, you won't put your head to the floor for anybody. Yeah. And like you like, I won't get down in front of you, Johnny, and put my head down and be like, oh, Johnny, thank you, or whatever. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say thank you and shake your hand or whatever else. But to actually put my head down on the floor, it's like humbling me to the point where, okay, I know that I'm a very small piece of whatever God's got going on, like I'm a very, very small piece, and God has helped me. God helps me sustain myself, my family. So like, that's where, okay, now I got to be grateful and I got to show my gratitude. And for me, just doing that 5 times a day, that's a big help in my life. Like I said, and just gives me that time away from whatever else. And like I pray in front of my children. And my children sometimes want to distract me and they want to talk to me, but I keep that in mind while I'm praying. Like, stay focused on what's going on. Like you're in conversation with God. I don't get mad at my kids because they don't know any better. Yep. But like one of the best feelings for me is when I'm praying and then my daughter or my son wants to come and they want to mimic what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because it's showing me that I'm providing a good example for my children that they're going to see, okay, whether it's myself or whether it's my wife who's praying, you know, and they want to jump on top of her and like, and for her journey is very different because she's only, you know, in the last 5 to 6 years come into the religion of Islam.
Yeah, wow.
You know, before that she was raised as a Christian.
Okay.
And then when obviously we met and her father is a Muslim, but she didn't really have much of a relationship with her father. So once I sort of came into her life and it was just weird that like that I was what she needed and I was that sort of push. I didn't push her to do it, but it was what she felt like she was missing from her life, and you know she's grateful for it now. So for her, when my kids distract her, she might like just be like, oh, like she'll smirk or smile or whatever, and you know, but she knows that she's not getting judged for that. Yeah, she knows that she's still learning and that she'll get that level as well. But it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a beautiful thing to be able to put aside that time for God and just do what you need to do. Like I said, it's obligatory for every Muslim. So,
you know, I think that when you put that time aside, it's actually not just for God, it's for you as well.
Oh, definitely,
right?
100%.
You know, another thing that I often talk about in podcasts is that, you know, especially like, and we'll start talking about, you know, your childhood and I guess, you know, growing up with your siblings and things like that. But, you know, when you're growing up, you're getting all these filters given to you, you know, lenses in terms of how to view the world, and you're formulating your own way of how you view what's happening and perceiving what's going on around you. And that, you know, whether you've got, well, obviously most people have parents. If you don't have parents, you've got somebody who's looking after you and providing you with those thoughts. And then at some point, you know, you develop your own friends, and then it's your friends that are now influencing the way that you see the world, and you sort of have like this bit of a mix in terms of how their parents have educated them and what they perceive, and your own parents and those views as well. And then you get to this point when you get older, and, you know, and it really, like, I think, you know, people don't really spend that time to honestly look at themselves until they leave home, and then they're by themselves. And then they've got to look in the mirror and they've got to decide, do I actually like myself and who I am, or is there something more that I need to find in this world, right? And it's only through finally getting that time away, that self-reflection, that you can try and connect with yourself and actually understand what it is that you love and enjoy in this world, and what it is that, you know, sort of drives and motivates you. And I feel like, having that structure in terms of taking the time away to focus on that, I actually feel like that there's a positive impact there that can probably help people find that connection, despite, you know, whatever else might be going around them in the world.
It's true.
So let's sort of pull it all back and tell people a little bit about, you know, so you grew up in Engadine.
Yep.
In the Shire, and you're the youngest of 7 brothers.
7 siblings.
7 siblings.
So 6 brothers, and there was 6 boys and 1 girl. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was the youngest, and then in between me, before me was my sister Sabrine.
Yep.
And then the 5 boys that came before her. So
wow.
Which is why my sister is called Sabrine, because in Arabic that means patience. So
she's gonna need a lot of that.
Yeah. So for my dad, it was patience in having a girl finally.
Yep.
Yeah. So 5 boys. Wow, it's pretty crazy. Eh?
So what was it like in the household? Like, what do you remember about?
Like for me, I was a lot younger than everyone basically. Yep. So between me and my eldest brother is 20 years.
Wow.
So, you know, like, what sort of relationship can you have at that point, like, other than them looking after their little brother, you know? So wasn't until I got a little bit older where I sort of felt more of a connection towards some of my older brothers. You know, obviously the connection with Billy has always been there because of our love and our passion for boxing, and for Billy, he always sort of looked after me, and so there's a 7-year gap between Billy and I.
Yep. That's actually the same as me and my brother. Yeah. So I got my brother's 7 years older than me. So.
And then, you know, with the rest, like, they sort of had their own relationships with one another, and I just remember them fighting all the time and you know, doing what boys and whatever else do. So The two that were closest in age were my brother Nasser and Billy.
Mm-hmm.
And they just used to fight all the time. I remember growing up and seeing that and just sort of having a laugh all the time. Be like, oh, this guy, you smashed him or he smashed him. And then, there was just my sister who was she was spoiled growing up, being the only girl. And she was the type that if my mum and dad left, and they sort of left us at home to go somewhere to go visit friends or whatever, she'd cry until they came home.
Wow.
So a lot of the time, like my brothers would have to call them and be like, "Oh, come and pick Sabrina up. She's it's not stopping." So, but and it was a good childhood for me. Like growing up, like I got looked after by my older brothers, and a lot of people would have said that I was spoiled because I had so many older brothers, but it wasn't spoiled until to the point that I became like some little brat or whatever else. But I knew that my brothers had my back always growing up. I knew that my family had my back. I always felt like I belonged to them, to my family. So even though I was the youngest and sort of at times was like, oh, I wish I was a little bit older so I could do what they do or enjoy what they enjoy, or if I could watch that movie with them or whatever it was. But it was a good childhood growing up for me, man.
And then logistically, I'm sort of curious as well. Like, how big was the place that you guys were living in? Like, were you guys sharing rooms? And all that?
Yeah. So I'm just trying to remember now. We owned the corner store in Engadine.
Okay.
So which was attached to the home that we're living on.
Yep.
That we're living in, and so I think my oldest brother Jihad, by that time, like that I was sort of growing up, he was already gone. Like he had gone off to university. He was living in Aladala at the time, or was going to university in Wollongong, and but living in Aladala. And then my second and third oldest brothers, Imad and Mohammed, they lived with their mum.
Okay.
Who my dad was married before he married my mum, and had my three oldest brothers. Yep. And then obviously once they got divorced, then my mum played a major part in raising my three oldest brothers, as well as the other four of us, the ones that share the same mum and dad, which are Nasser, Billy, Sabrina, and I. Yep. So just we made sure that we were good. We made sure that we were like always close to one another, but I shared a room with Sabrina for however many years. I think Nasser and Billy shared a room for however many years. And, like it didn't really matter, man. Like it's not like today where like you can have 4 to 5 people in the same room nowadays. And like, in those days, and there wasn't that feeling of, oh, like I need my space and whatever else. Yep. But, I think it's nowadays where like each kid needs their own room, and they need their own space, and they need their own privacy. Wasn't like that when we grew up. Yeah, it was cool for us to all be on top of each other. It didn't really matter. It didn't really matter.
Yeah, no. The reason why I asked is because I've got my 3 in the one room now. Yeah. So finally got the eldest 2 a bunk bed, and so they're always fighting over the bunks and stuff like that. But it's a lot of fun, and especially like when you go in at night and you look at them all asleep, you just go, melts your heart,
Yeah, 100%, definitely.
So then, when you went to school, did you go to school in Engadine before you went to the Islamic school, or you went to?
I did. So I did Engadine public school. Mm-hmm. I was at Engadine public school for like the shortest period, maybe 3 or 4 months. I was at Aladala public school because I was living with my eldest brother Jihad and his wife Erin, whilst my parents were overseas, so they looked after Sabrina and I. Yep. Because the others were old enough to sort of look after themselves by that time. Yep. So I did a short stint at Aladala public school. Then Engadine was where I was from, basically from kindergarten all the way to year 3 until we moved to Greenacre.
And then what do you remember about that experience? Do you remember anything? Was there anything notable about your time at Engadine?
The most notable thing of Engadine I remember was probably there was like that sort of little bit of bullying, sort of that little bit of racism sort of thing. Like it wasn't like major for me. I think having my brothers that had already sort of been through the school and you know, they sort of had made a little bit of a name for themselves, and my family had made a bit of a name for themselves as a good family too, through the corner store. So my dad was just always extra nice to people, you know, running the corner store. You know, had the best specials always, and people had like a high, you know, held us in a high regard. So by the time I was there, it was okay. I was pretty sad to leave when if I remember correctly, I was pretty sad to leave, and I remember like once we had gotten to Greneka and I was going to Risala College, a private Islamic school. Once I was there, like I spent the first, I can't even tell you how many months. That was the first time I learned the word hypochondriac.
Okay.
Because
calling in sick all the time.
Yeah, I was just like, I'd get there and I'd start crying, and you know, I'd say I feel sick and whatever, and then eventually the deputy principal, who was also my teacher, also taught our class, Miss Tofi. She actually said to me, "Oh, you're a hypochondriac," and I'm like, "What's that?" And she's like, "It means you act like you're sick when you're not sick." I was like, okay. Yeah. And I got over it eventually. I think it just took me a bit of time to adjust to the new surroundings and to the new environment, and to, you know, having a lot sort of stricter guidelines to follow.
Structure,
like it was a different structure to a public school. Took me a little bit of time, but I adjusted.
So then, from that perspective, you know, after you adjusted, what would the teachers say about you? Like, what was on your report cards as you were growing up?
I was a conscientious student. I remember that word, conscientious student. I think like most of them knew that I was a good kid, and that I tried hard, but I could be distracted pretty quickly. I was just, you know, I'd sort of want to fit in a little bit, and, you know, whether it was, you know, having a laugh in the class or whatever else. But most of the time, like, teachers always said that I was quite respectful. And that was a big thing for my parents, was that we always showed respect. And actually, it really wasn't even my parents who really looked at my report cards all too often. It was always my oldest brother, Jihad. And then obviously he'd relay it to my mum and dad. But, you know, because he played a major part in my education, he was an educator himself.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, so he was I think by the time I was in high school, he was either the deputy principal at Belmore Boys, or he became principal at Punchbowl Boys. So yeah, and he was credited with turning, you know, that school around, like a total pretty much 180 degrees, you know. So he played a major part in my education, and was the one who sort of, you know, when I was struggling a little bit with a certain subject or whatever, he'd take the time to help me. You know, my parents obviously could speak English, but weren't of English speaking backgrounds. So for them, they didn't really get involved too much with my homework and stuff like that. But I was a pretty good student. You know, I was always getting decent grades and whatever else. And I think I only ever got one letter sent home throughout my whole, you know, schooling life, which was for flicking somebody with a tie.
A tie?
Whipped them, must have hit their eye or something like that. But other than that, you know, I never really copped afternoon detentions. I never got suspended, never expelled. So I was a pretty decent student. Yep.
So then when you went into high school then, was it still the same, or did you change a little bit when you...
By the time I got to high school, I was like pretty switched on with what I knew what I wanted to sort of do by that time. I had in my head that I wanted to be a journalist for the longest time. So mainly a sports journalist.
Okay. And what was the reason behind that? Like,
I just love sports, and I just found that I could write articles, and, you know, a lot of the time I would, you know, Billy was already in his boxing career, and I'd sort of just muck around and write an article about Billy or his last fight, about, you know, whatever he did, like I just found that was my passion. So, you know, at that time anyway. So I sort of like just worked towards that during high school. You know, I excelled in English. Wasn't that great at maths, to be honest, but everything else was like, I just sort of cruised it through high school. And then once it hit year 11 and year 12, I sort of put my head down a little bit harder.
And then was there ever any pressure, you know, at home to do well in school or anything like that? Or was it people were pretty relaxed?
I think the only pressure probably came from my oldest brother, Jihad. Who was just like just get good grades so that once you go to university, you'll be able to, choose what you want to do really.
Yep.
Rather than having to, just sort of conform to whatever they give you.
Yeah, whatever marks you
Yeah,
got.
that's right. Like to whatever marks you got. So he just told me like, just, keep up your grades and whatever else. But there was no real pressure. Like there wasn't like, it wasn't sort of my mum and dad were on me and like, do your homework and things like that. Like it wasn't like that. I just did it because I knew that I had to do it to keep up good grades.
Yep.
So yeah. Other than that, no real pressure.
Yep. So then when did the boxing come into it for you?
Wow. So the journey of boxing really started when I was maybe when I was about 14 years old.
Yep. So you would have been, what, year 8 or something?
Yeah, around year 8. And, Billy had been boxing since he was 12 years old. And by the time that I was 14, he would have been 21. And, he would have been doing things as a pro and everything else. So I just sort of always looked up to Billy and just always looked to see. And obviously he was traveling the world as an amateur, competing in different tournaments, representing Australia. So for me, it just looked like a really cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'd go and watch him train often, and I sort of could pick up things pretty quickly and do certain things that other kids couldn't do or didn't understand how to do. So I gave it a go when I was 14. I was training for a few months when, I was trying to get fights and stuff like that, but it just wasn't happening for me.
Yep.
I'd go around for sparring and things like that and spar pretty well, but I just couldn't get fights for whatever reason. And, people at that time were telling me, it's because of who your brother is. Because, they think that maybe you're on that sort of level, because as an amateur fighter, especially starting out, you want to keep novices fighting novices rather than fighting somebody with, a major experience gap, just so that, you don't sort of turn the kids off or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I tried my best at 14. And then when I couldn't get fights, I was like, what's the point of training and not fighting?
Yeah.
So I went back to it when I was 17 eventually.
Yep.
And I remember having a conversation with a close friend of mine. His name was Mohammed Slippery Zayden. He was also a boxer. And he, was basically, we were hanging out, and he just saw me shadow boxing and stuff. And he was like, bro, you're good. Like, why don't you give this a go? I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't want people to think that I'm just trying to follow whatever Billy's doing. He's like, nah, but do you like boxing? I'm like, yeah, 100%. He's like, we watch it all the time together, and you understand it. So why don't you just give it a go? Just have a couple of amateur fights. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll do that.
Yeah.
Tried to convince my family, and I'm like, hell no, man. Like,
really?
You're doing really well in school. You know, you don't need it.
You're the smart kid.
Yeah, Billy doesn't really have much else. But you've got good grades, and you've got sort of, you want to be a journalist, and so stick to that.
Yeah.
I was like, just one fight. And they're like, look, we don't know. I was like, please, just one fight. And they made it. They allowed me to have that one fight. And once I had that one fight, it was like, okay, that's it.
Got to do more.
Yeah, I'm never going back. So I think my second fight, I actually had while my parents were overseas as an amateur. My second amateur fight, I had while my parents were overseas. They didn't know about it, so it was cool. And then I just kept going from there, man. And once my parents got back, and I was just about getting ready for my HSC, and they're like, "Listen, no boxing while you're doing your HSC, please.
Yep.
If you want to go back to it after that, it's cool, but make sure you're doing good at school. That's the main thing." So I think that break actually made me want it more. Like that breakaway, it was like an 11-month break from boxing. Yeah. And I had just sort of started to dabble my feet in it, and I was like, I got to get back to this. I want to get back to the boxing gym. Yeah. So once I completed my HSC, that was the first thing that I did. I went straight back to the boxing gym. And the beauty of it was that it was a lot closer to where I was as well. That Body Punch had moved from Regent's Park to Lakemba, so Greenacre to Lakemba was a couple of minutes. So it was perfect for me.
Live in the gym every day.
Yeah,
living in there.
I was so happy. I was just like, wow, this is like, now it's literally like 3 or 4 minutes away. I could walk here if I need to, and I was quite happy about it. And that's it. I had kicked off my amateur career, and sort of had aspirations for my amateur career that didn't really come about, but I always had my eyes set on becoming a professional boxer. Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to touch upon, I do like how in the amateur boxing world, it's they're always trying to pair people up with similar levels of experience, because you're right. You know, if you go in there and you know you're early on in your career, having your first few fights, and you get absolutely smashed, it's going to turn you away from the sport. You're going to lose somebody who could potentially be a world champion one day. They just needed the right progression to sort of get there. And I feel like in boxing, there's a lot more thought put into how we progress people through their career, you know, versus MMA is a bit...
records don't really matter in MMA.
Yeah,
so to speak.
Yeah, like I think, you know, people are willing to take more risks in MMA, whether it's just, you know, they're the opportunities that come or whatever. I feel like in boxing, you know, people they plan a little bit better, and I think it could also be, you know, the influence of having, you know, promoters in your corner, right? That are looking at, okay, if we look at Uwee as a commodity, you know, how do we maximize his value and his marketability? And these are the steps that we're going to walk through.
Yeah.
You know, obviously the work's still going to get done, but I think, you know, in the MMA context, you know, a lot of the times it's like, okay, if you're fighting for one of the big organizations, it's like, okay, well, you know, this is the fight you should take.
This is who we're matching you with.
This is who we're matching you with. These are your options. You know, they might give you 2 or 3 options, but they're always going to be hard fights, right? And not to say that in boxing they're easy fights. It's just to say that you can plan around these things and go.
There's a lot more thought process, definitely. Yeah. And I think with boxing, like a lot of the times, if you have somebody who's young and sort of up and coming, you'll put him in fights to help him gain that experience of what it's like to be in the ring. You know, what it's like to be hit.
What do they need?
With smaller gloves.
Yeah.
You know, different styles, different things like because like they can sort of take their time. I feel like with MMA careers, it's I don't know if I'm right in saying, but it's like it's a shorter career than boxing. I sort of feel like I know that, you know, MMA fighters are sort of a lot older in average age and things like that. But that might just be because they're sort of learning all the different, you know, styles. And things like that you can use in MMA. Yeah. So
the way that I sort of put it nowadays, because I feel like this is where MMA is going to go through its next cycle of growth in terms of technical development. So, you know, I guess if we look at the history and the sport of boxing, you know, boxing's been around for so many years. Yes, over time, you know, styles have adjusted and changed, but we have a fairly good blueprint in terms of what's effective. And so I sort of like, you know, if you think about it like an X and Y axis, right? You've got horizontal development. So, you know, in the sport of MMA, that's like, you know, okay, how good's your boxing versus your wrestling versus your jiu-jitsu, and you put them all on the horizontal axis. Like, how many techniques do you know?
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, the further out to the right you go, the more techniques you know. But then in a sport like boxing, it's all about vertical depth.
True.
How good are you at that particular style?
Yeah.
So, you know, on that boxing arc, you know, you might know how to throw your punches, but you don't know, you know, how an orthodox fighter should deal with a southpaw, or you don't know the inside game or the outside game, or like all of these different things, right? That technical depth is what you get out of training a style-specific sport, like boxing, right? And I feel like, so that's why I say, you know, we're getting to this point where I think mixed martial artists are getting better at each of the individual disciplines, you know, and we're seeing, you know, these guys who can put it together so well, but they've got technical depth, right? But, you know, if we go back to like the McGregor versus Mayweather example, right? Yes, he's a good boxer by MMA standards, but of course you're going against Mayweather. Like, the depth is a different level. There's so many things that he's seen, and that's
right? Despite McGregor being of a boxing background, which is what he started as. He started as an amateur boxer and things like that from my understanding.
Yeah, he did. Yep.
Yeah, so it just shows that there's obviously different levels, and obviously Mayweather wasn't at his absolute peak. He's not at his peak anymore, you know, he wasn't at his best, but it was obviously too good for McGregor, and that was, you know, I don't really think that was a thing where people were like, okay, MMA versus boxing, like, which is what a lot of people made it out to be. Because obviously McGregor couldn't use his mixed martial arts tools. Yeah. So, which I'm sure if he was able to use his mixed martial arts tools, he would have been the one knocking Mayweather out. Yeah. You know, so it was just a money grab. Yeah. I think more than anything. Like, you'll never really be able to answer that question, like, who's better, an MMA fighter or a boxer?
Yeah. You can only talk about in those respective disciplines.
In their discipline. That's it.
And like you know, I'll still watch like if it's you know sport specific, absolutely. Like I think if you're you know a person that's really you know into all types of martial arts, you got to watch everything. You know, that's me. Like I like watching boxing, I like watching kickboxing, I like watching jiu-jitsu. I like to study all of it because I feel like there is some translation in terms of you know whether it's the distance and the angles, right? Like I think they're the things that will translate across most striking styles.
Yeah. But yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
100%. Like I'll watch Adesanya and be like, oh wow, like he does this really well.
Yeah.
Like even though he'll be kicking,
Yep.
I'll be like, oh, but look at his range, look at his distance, and yeah, you could definitely translate stuff like that over to you know boxing and things like that. Like at the end of the day, these guys are high level athletes.
Yeah.
They're high level fighters.
Yep.
And you know that's that. So for me, I'll watch them. I watch MMA. Not you know like on a weekly thing, but if I know that it's a big card or there's a big fight or whatever, like I'll tune in.
Yeah, you enjoy it.
You know, or even if boxing's going on at the same time, it could be like I favor to watch the MMA over the boxing. And you know, some people are like, oh really? But like yeah, I'd rather watch the higher level fight. Like to be honest, you know. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then, you know, from that perspective, when it comes to your own style in terms of boxing, now obviously you know. Your brother will be a bit of an influence, but who are the boxers that you feel have influenced your style the most?
I don't actually feel like my brother Billy has influenced my style the most because growing up, like I looked at what Billy did and was amazed by it, but I just didn't have those attributes. Like I didn't have the amazing sort of, you know, the reflexes that he has and like the things that he could sort of do. Like I feel like Billy is probably like a bit speedier than me or was a bit speedier than me when it came to like hand speed and, you know, his ability to sort of pull back and you know, make people miss and things like that. Like
and cover distance.
That was a different style to what I wanted. And to be honest with you, what I sort of like when I started boxing, I wanted to be more of a complete fighter than that. I didn't want to be the type that, okay, look, because that worked for Billy up to a certain extent, but then when he was on the absolute world level, where he fought initially for the WBO world title, that style didn't work for him.
Yeah.
You know, and it wasn't until he went to Billy Hussein and really started to work on the fundamentals of boxing where I was like, oh wow, I could see Billy improving so much. He still kept those attributes. But he had added so many more layers to his game. He became a good body puncher. He became a good pressure fighter. He became like he could sort of do different things, and that's what I wanted to do. So my main influences were watching I'd watch a lot of Arturo Gatti, and you know like not so much the wars and stuff, but like watching more when he'd use his sort of movement and getting his head out of the way, which he didn't do a lot of because he was just a blood and guts warrior. But you know, watching people like him, Oscar De La Hoya, I used to like watching Shane Mosley a lot, and you know. It wasn't like certain styles that I was like, okay, I want to fight in that style. It was just you pick up certain attributes from each guy, you know, and that's how I sort of did it growing up. And I still watch a lot of boxing, and I still like to look at different fighters and be like, you know, just watching Tank the other day, for example, and watching his foot range and you know his distance and how well he's able to sort of roll under certain punches. I'm like, wow, like. You know, I know I can roll under punches, but can I come up with a knockout or a devastating blow like the one that he landed on
liver shot
on not just a liver shot, but even the in the second round where he dropped Ryan, you know, with a left hook after rolling under Ryan's left hook. Yeah, like that was amazing to me, and that's sort of stuff that I'll still develop and I still want to learn and I still want to get better at. So. I know that I haven't hit my ceiling yet, so there's a lot to learn in boxing, and you know I'm 13 years deep in this game, but these kids have been doing it since they were 7 years old, 6 years old. 5 years. I've got a lot of time to make up for, you know. So for me, I just consistently try to learn different skills and different attributes that I can take from fighters, and you know whether that's somebody like Evander Holyfield or somebody even like. You know, I watch Muhammad Ali, and just, you know, how he does certain things, how he pulls back and is ready to counter, things like that. So, yeah, but I can't say that one certain style is the style that I've based my game around. I reckon I'm still trying to work out my
Your own style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still trying to work it out. Like, because sometimes I feel comfortable fighting on the inside. Sometimes I feel comfortable being on the outside. Just depends on who's in front of me, to be honest.
Yeah. I think that's always interesting because, I think whenever you go into a fight, you can game plan as much as you like, but until you actually feel that person in front of you, that's when it's like, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
I need to actually take a moment to get you got to get your read. You get to get, your view on their timing and their balance and their footwork.
And you can watch somebody like as much as you want and like be like, oh yeah, I'll do really well against him. But then once you're in there and you just, there's certain factors that you can't, like you don't really account for.
Yeah.
Which is their distance, which is their range, which is their control. Like those are certain things that for the first couple of rounds of the fight, you're going to have to work out. So like, for example, when I fought Kai, I knew that Kai was going to be the slower guy against me. But what I didn't account for was, his jab was landing early. Like he in the first round and I think the second round, like he landed a few jabs that he threw and I was like, why is he hitting me? Like, I feel like he's not in the right range, but it was just his sort of style and how he sort of like stands up, and it was a bit different to what I had seen. So I needed to make an adjustment on the fly. Yeah. And I did. I eventually adjusted to that. I knew that, okay, I'm not going to stand in front of him. I'm just going to be on a certain angle, or I'm going to leave my lead hand down and make him think that I'm there where I'm not, where I can pull out. So, yeah, like you need to be in there to actually feel it.
Yeah. From just to switch gears a bit, but still on the topic of boxing, when it comes to, those sorts of fights, and obviously, in prep for whoever, comes next in your career, how do you approach, I guess this is going to be a multi-part question. Let's just talk about when it comes to getting into the ring. Can you talk us through, like, do you do a lot of, are you a visualization guy? Like, is that what you do? Or how do you approach that, making the walk to the ring? And then also, can you speak to, I guess, some of the feelings that you go through? Like, do you get scared? Do you get nervous? Like, I guess, what are sort of the emotions that you go on?
Visualization has become a major part of what I want to do. In the past few years, before that, I never used to, like, I guess you would sort of visualize without actually knowing what visualization is about.
Yep.
So I remember, earlier on in my career when I'd go for runs and I'd think about how the fight would end, or like I'd put certain pictures in my head, but it was just, I never really viewed it as visualization. I just, because I wasn't sort of aware of it.
Yep.
And I hadn't done enough like looking into it. But when I think about it, yes, I was visualizing back then.
Yeah.
Because I'd visualize, I remember like before my pro debut, and I would visualize how it was going to end, and exactly how I thought it was going to end was how it ended.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that the action that was in my head, that once I had him out, like what I was going to do was exactly what I did. It was
you programmed it.
Yeah. Like it was like it came to life because of how I thought about it. But I do like to visualize now and sort of think about how I will sort of make the fight happen and stuff. But like you can't always predict those things.
Of course.
Like you just can't. There's so many factors. In terms of how do I approach, like when I'm actually entering the ring and the feelings that I feel, like I think with experience you just get better at handling the situation. So with my last fight, that was the most relaxed that I'd ever been leading into, like, going into the ring. Even knowing that, okay, I'm fighting a higher caliber of fighter than I fought previously.
Yep.
I was still more at ease than I had ever been. And I think that really comes down to preparation as well. And if you know that, like, I haven't cut any corners, and I know that I know how fit I am, I know how extremely ready I am, then you're going to go in there with a relaxed mind state.
Yeah.
You know that, okay, now it's just time to perform and to put it together.
Yeah.
But yeah, you go through a whole range of emotions, man. Like whether that be nerves, but nerves are good. Nerves are good as a fighter, I believe, or as any type of athlete, because it's what's going to keep you on your toes. It's what keeps you sharp in between the ears, and just knowing that, okay, I've got to perform now.
And then I guess for you, throughout camp, do you ever get afflicted by doubts?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Even with this last camp, maybe 6 to 7 weeks out of the fight, because we had already been preparing for 5 weeks before that, because we both had the ample time to prepare for the fight. And when your body's not feeling great and you've got little niggling injuries and things like that because of the camp, or sparring didn't go as well as what you wanted it to go, there's always those lingering doubts, those thoughts that cross your mind. Like, it's, if you say that they don't, then I believe it's a lie. But at the same time, I hit a certain point, like when I was 6 weeks out from the fight, and I was like, man, look how ready I am. Like, already, like, look how ready I am. Like, look how fit I am. Look how, and I just sort of started, that switch had flicked over, and I was like, okay, there's no way I'm losing this fight. The only way that he's going to win this fight is if he knocks me out. That was the thought that was in my head. I was like, he's not going to outbox me. I know he's not going to outbox me. And I'm not going to be stupid enough to fall into any of his traps. So the only way that he can really win is by knocking me out. I went to that cliff. I was like, okay, that's the possibility. Do you still want to go through with it? Yeah, of course. That's it. After that, I was like, whatever God decides for me, God decides for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, those thoughts throughout camp, they definitely come. And I think, as the stakes get higher, those thoughts are definitely going to be there, because it's not about you're not worried about losing or getting knocked out or whatever. It's just, you're worried about not performing. That's the biggest thing. Like, okay, you've got an opportunity here to showcase your abilities, and you don't do that to the best of your ability. That's the worst thing. Yeah.
I think that definitely resonates for me. It's like, I don't get fixated on outcomes. I get fixated on, okay, I want to make sure it's a good showing.
Yeah, performance.
Right? Yeah, the performance is what's important, because that's, at the end of the day, irrespective of outcome, you're the guy that's got to look in the mirror when you go home at night. And if you go, fuck, I should have done this or I should have done that, that's regret.
100%.
Right?
You don't want to leave those. You don't want to leave those things, to chance. You don't want to regret. And I've done that in a lot of camps. Like, as I've gotten more experience and matured, I now know, okay, I can look back at some of my earlier performances and be like, okay, that was strictly because of, that was purely because of how I trained, or the things that I didn't do right, or my nutrition, or whatever else, or my recovery, or whatever it was. But as I've matured and realized that, okay, you're putting all your eggs into this basket. Now you've got no room for error. Yeah. You've got no room to turn around and say, I could have done better at this, or could have done better at that, because could be lights out at any time. Yeah.
It's also interesting, especially like for you coming back into it at a later age. There's people that would say, like, if you're going to go for it, you got to go for it when you're young. But I think there's also merit in coming back to it at a later age, when you're wiser, when you're smarter. And now you haven't taken that sort of damage that a lot of other guys who have been going through it the whole time, because I think, as we know, once your chin's gone, your chin's gone. You never get it back.
I think, for me, that's a big part of my career. Like, and I think that about my career sometimes. Like, I'm 30 years old now. This is like, I'm at a later age than what some people may consider to be the peak. Yeah. But at the same time, I know that I don't have the miles on my clock that other fighters do. Yeah. I know that those miles aren't there because I haven't fought as much, and I didn't have as big an amateur background and things like that. Like, you look at somebody like Vasily Lomachenko, who had, 290 or however many fights it was, I think 397, whatever it was. Those miles on his clock began to show a lot earlier in his pro career than I guess they would have really accounted for. Yeah. So for me, I know that, like, I haven't hit my ceiling yet. Yeah. Like, that's exciting for me. It's what keeps me going at the moment. Yeah.
All right. Let's switch off boxing for a little bit. So when you finished high school, you decided, okay, I'm going to go do journalism. Yep. What was that like? How did you find, studying journalism? And I guess, did you have a bit of a plan? Okay, I want to go and be a sports journalist.
That was the plan. Yep. Once I realized that wasn't how it works, I was like, no. By the time I sort of finished university, for me, it became a means. University became a means of just boxing.
Okay.
because I knew that it was keeping my parents happy. I knew that it was keeping my family happy. Like that's the absolute truth. Like,
Yeah.
I knew that. Like for me, I was going through university thinking about the Olympics.
Okay.
You know, like that was my goal at that time. It wasn't, you know, to become the best journalist or whatever. And even though like I was doing decent, I sort of lost the passion for it as I was going through university.
Yeah.
So by the time I hit my third year, and I was sort of dealing with tutors who had been journalists in their time, and they were no longer journalists, they were now tutors and teachers and whatever else. I sort of realized that, like, okay, maybe this isn't really what I want. You know, but I was already 2.5 years through or whatever, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to change it. I'm just going to finish it, leave it there on the side, keep my family happy, tell them that, look, I got something to fall back on. If boxing doesn't work out, here it is. So yeah, no, I enjoyed it, but at the same time, I was like, I don't really like the agendas that are set with journalism. Like, you know, if you're going to go work for a major publisher or like Daily Telegraph, whatever, like you're given an agenda. The stuff that you write is going to be edited like heavily.
Yeah.
Once I learned all of those things, it turned me off journalism a fair bit, to be honest with you. I was like, nah. And then, you know, the fact that I'd say to them, I just want to be a sports journalist. And they'd be like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, you got to cover everything,
you got to cover everything to
Yep.
start, you know. And then if you become a really good sports journalist, then that'll be the sort of field that you talk about. But other than that, that's not how it works. So I was like, oh, really, man? Okay. And, you know, and then to be honest with you, like as time has also gone on, I guess you can sort of say that anybody could be a journalist if they really want to, you know, through blogging or through, you know, writing stuff on the internet or whatever it is. Like people, it's no longer like a niche sort of thing, you know, like anybody can really have a role in the media as long as they've got an opinion and they're free to voice it. You know? So I just sort of grew up and I was like, nah, okay, I'm just going to stick to the boxing. Once I finished university, there was the opportunity to sort of do that. But I was like, I need something that's going to be flexible enough for me to be able to train. Yeah. That's all I could think about. Yeah. And that flexibility came when my brother, my second oldest brother, Emad, offered me the job at Feinstein at his car detailing and car wash company. And, you know, he basically took me under his wing and taught me the ins and outs of his business. And you know, I was beneficial for him and he was beneficial for me in that I could take time off before my fights. I could sort of come to work at a certain time or leave at a certain time in order to make it to training. So that for me was the most important thing. And then, you know, obviously just having enough money to get through and having something there. And that was pretty much it, man. Like that was my whole worry about, like, was how am I going to box? That's all I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's I find the whole journalism thing, and especially right now, you know, I've been sort of going down the rabbit hole thinking about AI a lot. And I don't know if you've played around with any of it, but it's kind of scary. I've
seen it. I typed into Chat GPT the other day to write an article for me of like, I gave it minimal details and I was like, fuck. That's crazy. Yeah. That's nuts. Yep. I was like, man, this world is, we have a way of getting lazier and lazier and lazier and like just allowing, you know, things or AI to do things for us now.
You know, it's funny because like I almost feel like it's going to come full circle when I say that. So if you think about it, let's go back before computers. You know, what were the industries that we sort of developed? Well, we developed things that were based around food production. You know, how do we now logistically transport that food to make it easier for people to access, you know, food? So, you know, the staples in terms of having something to eat, having a roof over your head, having some clothes to wear, those things have never really gone away. But then it's like we sort of created all of these other industries around getting that food to places, building high-rise apartments so that we can all live in these blocks, so that we can all commute to the city to do these jobs that, you know, are essentially going to be partially displaced by artificial intelligence, especially, like I've been mucking around with it as well. And I can send, print off, like, or not print off, but like run the subtitles file from a video, put it into ChatGPT and go, hey, write me a YouTube Shorts title for this.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, I don't even have to think anymore.
No.
I could just, and then, here are 3 options. And then it gives me 3 options. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, write me a description and then give me 30 hashtags. And I'm like, what? I don't.
Everything. There's no real critical thinking anymore.
Yeah.
There really isn't. And obviously not everybody is utilizing it yet, but you can be damn sure that very soon.
Well, if it's meant to make our jobs easier, this is the thing, you may not have a job. And then what do we end up going back to? So it's like the argument for it is like, if it's going to make your life more easier so that you can then go and pursue your other interests. And it's like, okay, well, some people don't have other interests, right? Their job might be a huge part of their personality. And then it's like, okay, what are the things that AI can't replace? Well, it's going to be things like sport. Yeah. It will be things like food, whether it's cooking or agriculture, right? Not everybody's hankering to get out there and become a farmer again.
It's true.
Right? And then, what do we do with all these, massive offices that we've built that, may not need workers in them anymore? It's a real interesting sort of rabbit hole to go down. And, the more I play with it, I'm just I think it's worthwhile for people to have a play with it because then you can sort of understand, okay, we're in for a whole world of changes.
Does it sort of make you feel like, geez, life is becoming something that we don't really want it to be?
So one of the so I don't know if you've ever read the Dune series of books. Dune, no. So Dune's it's a sci-fi book, but I think it was the original book was in the 80s by Frank Herbert, and then his son Brian and another author produced a whole series of books. But when I first started reading these books, it was probably so when I was a kid, my brother was really into computers, and we had this game called Dune 2, and it was based off the books. Yep. And he used to play this game. I used to love that game, right? And so then I think I might have read one of the books when I was a kid, younger, but then I came back to it only a few years ago, probably just when COVID was happening, and I found myself with a lot more time. I was just started reading, and I've been reading the whole series again, and it was even though it's make-believe, science fiction, so to speak, so many of the things that he's built in this, universe of this science fiction universe parallels, what we're experiencing in the real world.
Come to fruition.
Yeah, and the whole one of the premises in the history of, I guess, this series of books is that they had this war with machines, with robots, because humans, we had made artificial intelligence to basically make our lives easier. And then once artificial intelligence could start to conduct its own reasoning, it realized, it would be more efficient for the world if we just enslave humanity and get them to do what we want, and we can make everything more efficient and process driven. And so then, it gets to this point where, the machines control all these different galaxies and things like that. And then humans are trying to break free of this because essentially it's you're enslaved to the computers. But I guess from that perspective, there are people that were also happy, working for the computers because they had, a better role or a better position and things like that. And so, it was interesting from that perspective because, you go through these books and you're sort of reading this alternate universe in terms of the history of things. And then it's wow, this could actually be what happens to us.
It's not that far off.
No, it's not actually that far off. And so that's why when I start thinking about it, it's it's kind of scary. But at the same time, I think from that perspective, it's going to come full circle in the sense of, what will be important for people when computers could theoretically do a lot of these mundane tasks that we do. Yeah. And the basics are actually going to remain. We're going to need a way to get food. We're going to need a way to have shelter. We're going to need to be able to put clothes on our back. And then we're going to have to find, things that are physical that we can do. Yeah. Whether that's martial arts, whether that's other things. There's so many things that could be done from that perspective. Will that suit majority of civilization? Probably not, because, everybody's got their own interests.
It's true.
You can't have everybody wanting to be a boxer, or everybody wanting to go and be a hunter, or everybody wanting to go and be a farmer. If everybody was a farmer, then, you don't need large-scale agricultural farms because everybody's just growing their own. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, it's a pretty interesting position to be in for us at this point in time. And I feel like it's sort of going to show us, how hollow the pursuit of money is. because as an example, I think in the finance world, stockbrokers and things like that. Like if all the stockbrokers can be theoretically replaced by AI automatically doing the trades and generating this income, like there's no meaning to it anymore, right? Or what is the meaning that we suddenly give all this power to generate this income to machines, and then suddenly we redistribute that wealth to everybody else? Like, unfortunately, I don't, in our current way the world works, it's not really going to happen. It's going to mean that the people who control the AI or have the best algorithms will get the best results.
They're going to benefit the most.
They're the ones that are going to benefit the most, and they'll use that profit to further their own agendas.
Definitely.
Right. So that's the scary part. So we went on a bit of a tangent, but I always find it interesting to talk about that kind of stuff. But so when it came to working in the detailing business, right? So were there any sort of learnings that you took away from that?
Heaps.
Yeah?
Heaps. Just learning how to deal with different people, whether it was dealing with people in the dealerships, as in the managers, and having to, pretty much suck up to managers, or, having to deal with, there was a lot of things, man, like a lot of fires that you had to put out on a daily basis. Just learning to deal with different problems, dealing with pressures of, like when you get a couple of sickies, what do you do? Like I was managing, with the help of one other, 50 to 60 employees.
Wow.
So, you get 4 to 5 sick in one day. You've got to shuffle people around, and, just a lot of pressures, end of month pressures, like having been in the automotive industry, what end of month is like. That's it. You got to get the cars out, and that falls a lot onto the contractors, which are like the detailers and stuff like that. Yep. So, trying to convince your workers to stay back, like, because money wasn't always the thing that would sort of drive these people. The employees, and just being able to keep good relations with your employees and with managers and stuff that are at the dealerships. I learned heaps, man. I learned a lot on the accounting side. My brother pretty much dumped all of that stuff on me. Where once he learned that, like, you is pretty privy with all of this stuff. Like he'd make me do a lot of the pays, and whether it was the pays or the accounts and stuff like that, man. I learned heaps. So like if I was to ever have to run my own business or whatever, like I'd know how to get stuff done. Definitely. It was a good part of my life. Good learning experiences for me, and obviously it wasn't my passion. It wasn't the thing that I enjoyed the most, but I knew that I needed to do it to make ends meet and to be able to do what I wanted to do as a boxer. And I had to give my brother the respect that he was giving me, that he was giving me basically free reins to do what I wanted to do, but just make sure that everything at work is under control. Just make sure my phone's not going off. Yeah. So that was, it was a good part of my life, man. Yeah.
So then when it came to then relationships and things like that, how did that sort of change your perspective on things?
I just realized that not everything is so black and white, man. Like, it's not just because you're a good person that it's gonna, or you feel like, I'm on good terms with this manager or whatever. Like in the business world, like if what needs to be done isn't being done, it doesn't matter how good a person you are. Like it's business. We're just gonna go on and find the next person that can do it. So a lot of the times you'd feel like, oh wow, what a snake. Yeah. Like you'd feel like, like
it's really cutthroat.
It's like it's a real cutthroat industry, and like what a snake. Like just maybe a month or two ago, this guy was singing our praises, and now he's rubbishing us in meetings and whatever else. So you sort of learn to take away the like that emotional that emotional part of the relationship. You're just like, okay, we'll treat it as business. Yeah. That's the most that's the best thing to do for both of us. Yeah. And it makes the most sense to do that. Yeah. So yeah, like when it came to relationships, like obviously you'd need to be good, and you'd need to be mindful about how you spoke to people, and about, you know, what you sort of did because you didn't want to ruin those relationships. And for me, like, these were long-standing contracts that my brother had with these companies. So I didn't want anything to be like, oh, because of your younger brother, you know, you're losing this contract that you've had for 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
You know, so that there was that sort of pressure of doing the right thing. And but generally, man, we had a good I believe they still do have a good relationship with these dealerships and with the managerial part, you know, which is always changing. It's always it's like revolving doors in the automotive industry.
Yeah, and then they end up at different places, and you're here now.
Yeah, now you're here. Yeah, like whether it's sales or whether it's, you know, in parts or whatever it is that the people are in. You're like, that's why you never want to burn any bridges. So I learned a lot about that stuff.
So okay. To switch it up a little bit as well. So that's, you know, I guess would have helped foster your relationship with EMAD.
Yeah.
Right. And then you already talked about Jihad in terms of, you know, he helped you a lot with the schooling and things like that. We'll get to Billy in a second, but I guess from the other siblings' perspectives, like, I guess, how's your relationship with them sort of changed over the years as well?
Just as I've grown up, you know, like, you're not so much the just the youngest anymore. You know, like, I've got a family of my own. I've got a wife. I've got children. So like they sort of they sort of respect that. They sort of respect that. Okay, I'm my own man now. Yeah, you know, and I've always had a pretty funny relationship with my sister, where like it's definitely a love-hate relationship. But yeah, now that we're a bit older. So it's all love, you know. It's I sort of always wanted to be the older sibling when it came to my sister. Yeah. Like, I always treated her as such, and I was always like, you know, tried to make it out like I was the older sibling, but even though she's 4 years older than me. And then with my other brothers, Nasser and Mohammed, it's a cool relationship with them too, you know, like Nasser's actually a neighbor of ours, and Mohammed is just one of the funniest guys that I've ever known. And like, we're all like really supportive of one another, and that's a major thing. Just knowing that, you know, even if the whole world turns on us, like, we've got each other and we've got each other's backs, and you know, and then with our wives and stuff like that, like, we've all got good relationships between them as well. So, you know, at family events, we can all sit down and have a laugh, and you know, we can, I'm going to say, like, put it on each other, like, you know, tease each other and whatever. No one, like, will leave there upset and be like, oh, you know, they said this or they said that. Yeah. It's pretty cool, the relationship that we have in our family. And as time has gone on, like, I've started to feel a lot less like, oh, they don't, you know, value my input because I'm the youngest. Yep. That's how I felt a lot of the time. Or when I was growing up, I felt like no one really values my input, so I won't even talk. Now, like, they know, okay, Uwee's a pretty switched on kid, and he's been through a lot in his life, and he can talk about his experiences in life as well. So yeah, let's
talk a little bit about family. So if you don't mind sharing, I guess, how did you and you mentioned she was a Christian before, and then how did you guys meet?
Nicole, my wife, and I, we met at when I was actually working at Feinstein.
Oh wow.
So the car wash is located in Zetland. Yep. And she was actually working as a pharmacy assistant in Zetland as well, in the same shopping centre, East Village. Yep. So, yeah, I just saw her one day. I was walking past our office, and I saw her talking to one of my cousins who works with us. And she was talking to him, and when I seen her, I was just like, whoa. I was like, who's that? And then he's like, she works upstairs. She works in the pharmacy, so I just found any excuse to go up there, really. And
I'm sick. The hypochondriac comes back out.
Yeah, the hypochondriac comes. No, it was like, I had gone up there and just I needed something. I came up with an excuse to find something, and saw her the first time, just normal hello. And then I think the second time that I actually went up there, it was actually after one of my fights, and I had a bit of a bruised eye. And there's a certain powder that you can put on your eye to help the bruising go down. So I went up there to ask her if she had it, and she's like, oh yeah, congratulations on your fight too. I was like, oh, how do you know? And she's like, oh, I saw it on Sam, your cousin's Snapchat. I was like, oh, that's cool. She's like, yeah. So then it just sort of the relationship unfurled, you know, through Zetland. So
Mm.
again, there's another great thing to come out of working for EMAT.
That's it.
And yeah, man, so we just started to see one another, and, you know, I brought her into the family, and everybody was sort of really, really happy with the sort of person that she is. And, you know, I fell in love with her pretty quickly, and we went from there, man. I think we were married within, I'm going to say a year, and I think I'm going to say we were married within a year and 8 months.
Wow.
We've been meeting one another.
Yeah.
It might even be sooner, maybe a year and 6 months.
Wow.
But I knew pretty quickly that she was the one.
Yeah.
And then once we sort of got to talking, and I found out that her dad was Turkish Muslim.
Yep.
That like really, like, I was like, oh wow, so you're a Muslim? And she's like, yeah, but I've grown up with my mum my whole life and whatever else. And, you know, I was like, okay. And then she sort of had an interest in learning about Islam as well. So that was like that brought us even closer.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, like I remember being quite worried at the start of introducing her to my dad, because, you know, she has a few tattoos and whatever else that are visible.
Yeah.
But like, you know, when it came to those worries, like, they sort of dissipated very quickly, because once everybody had met her, they're like, this girl's a beautiful, genuine girl. So yeah, I was pretty quick to put a ring on it.
Yeah. No, that's nice. And then can we talk about kids?
Yeah, definitely, man.
So so you got 2, right?
I have 2.
Yep.
I have 2, Aaliyah and Jabril.
Yep.
Yes.
I always like reflecting on this, right? Like the moment when your first child comes into the world, right? So for me, you know, when Cadence came into the world, I always talk about how
beautiful name, man.
she came out, and she was looking at me, like she came out eyes open, and like very emotional, right? Like I cried, but you know, as a dad, like I don't care what anyone wants to say if I'm sexist or whatever, but I had this overwhelming sense that I'm going to protect this girl.
100%.
Right? That was and I contrast that against my son Harley, who's the second child in our family. Very different feeling when he came into the world. For me, when Harley came into the world, I had like this, you know, almost like the Lion King proud father, you know, you know, want to hold him up in the air kind of a thing. That was like 2 very different emotions that, for me anyway. When you reflect on, you know, your kids coming into the world, was it like that for you, or?
Okay, well, the thing is with my children when they came into the world, so with both my children have been premature. So Aaliyah was born at 33 weeks.
Wow.
Which is obviously 7 weeks early. So that was like just a bit of a shock that she was coming so early. I was like, oh, it's still a couple of months before this is meant to happen. And, you know, when she came out, she was small, but she wasn't like tiny. She was, I think, 2 and a bit kilos, but they basically had to put her straight on the CPAP and things like that.
Into
so
NICU,
yeah, so she was straight into the NICU ward, and like that was confronting in itself, because you're like, oh, like, you know, is she going to be okay? And, you know, like worried about, they've got all of these machines hooked up to her, and so that was like a real worry. And we had to actually leave her at the hospital and come home every day for the first 2 weeks.
Wow.
So that in itself was a challenge, because, you know that you're going home without your child.
Yeah.
You know, and even though they're in like the most amazing care at the Royal Hospital for Women, it was just that feeling of like going home. Like, and if I felt that, I knew that my wife was really feeling the sting of that.
Yeah, you gutted.
Yeah, like she would have been gutted. Like you know. But you know, eventually Aaliyah was good enough to come home, and you know, it was sort of good because they put her into a routine for us.
Yep.
You know, she had a sleeping routine and everything else, and she could deal with the different noises because you know, she's constantly hearing
all the beeps,
all the beeping and stuff, and I wouldn't wake her up, obviously. So that was like you, I had that overwhelming feeling that okay, I've got to protect this child, and I was only 25 at the time. I was maybe 1 month shy of my 26th birthday, or was I 24 going on 25? No, I think I was 25 going on 26. And like I just sort of felt like, okay, now it's really time to grow up, so to speak, and to know that life isn't just about me anymore.
Yeah.
And it's not just about Nicole anymore. It's about us as a family.
Yep.
And then it wasn't too long until my wife had fallen pregnant again, and there was only going to be like 1 year and 3 months or 1 year and 4 months between Aaliyah and Jabril. But then Jabril was born actually at 25 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was probably the hardest thing that I've had to deal with. Just Jabril being born so early, at 25 weeks and 2 days to be exact. I remember when Nicole's water broke. Yeah, that was a big shock, man, because we're like, okay, like, what do we do? Because, you know, a premature baby, like, we've had a premature baby, but not that premature. And it's funny that with Aaliyah, spending that 2 weeks in the hospital with her was sort of like, it was setting us up for knowing how to deal with having Jabril in the NICU. And he had a lot of complications, man. So he spent 4.5 months in the hospital. So you've gone from, you know, leaving Aaliyah every day for 2 weeks, and that was hard enough. Having to do that with Jabril for 4.5 months, and he would sort of have like a lot of medical issues as he was growing up. You know, he had to have some of his bladder died, which had to be cut out, so he had to have a urostomy for it. Yeah, so he had a bag for a little bit, you know, until his bladder was healed enough for them to stitch it back together. So that was like a big operation, and you know, he had all of the things that premature babies usually have, which are chronic lung disease and neck and things like that. So like at one point he was so sick that they actually told us that within 4.5 hours your son will be gone. So they were basically asking us, like, do you want to pull the plug on the life support? And you know, I remember that moment that we had sat in that room with the doctor, and she had told us that, and that was the most gut-wrenching feeling that you could possibly ever have. Like, as a parent, you know, losing your child would be the hardest thing. I know that would be the hardest thing.
Yeah.
So when she told us that, and I remember just Nicole and I bursting into tears, and we were just, you know, trying to console one another. And I called my dad and basically just told him, I go, Dad, I need you to come to the hospital to come and pray for Jabril. And when he came, you know, he saw us. I remember Billy had dropped him off, and they saw us sitting on a couch downstairs in the lobby waiting for them. And yeah, my dad was just like, look, is he breathing? And we're like, yeah. And it was like, then you guys don't do anything. Just leave it with God. Yeah. And whatever he's going to be, he's going to be. Yeah. You know, and we need to accept whatever it is, but let's pray for him. And you know, and lo and behold, man, like, so one of the things that happened was every single part of his functions had completely stopped. Like, even his kidneys, which are the last thing to stop. Yeah. So even his kidneys had stopped. So like, they were like, okay, look, obviously, you know, your son is very sick. We don't forecast that he's got a lot of time. Yep. But God worked his miracle, and now my son Jabril is, you know, he's 3.5 years old, and he's thriving. And he eventually was diagnosed with cerebral palsy due to a brain bleed from birth.
Oh, from birth.
From birth, yeah. So he had a brain bleed that led to his cerebral palsy, which to us was like, wasn't a big deal. Like, I was like, you know, it's okay. He's, you know, whatever he's able to do, he's able to do. If he's not able to walk, they told us, look, he's not going to be able to walk. He's walking. You know? Yeah. They told us that he's not going to be able to talk. He's talking. He's counting backwards. Yeah. You know, like, he's doing amazing things, and he's still a little bit behind in terms of, you know, what you'd expect a 3.5-year-old to do. But for me, I'm like, man, Jibby, he can do whatever he wants to do, all on his time. Yeah. So, the things that he does now, and you know, we've been very lucky to be aligned with the Cerebral Palsy Alliance, who have helped us immensely with all of the early intervention therapies, and, you know, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, everything else, man. I was like, and then Nicole, my wife, has put in so much work towards helping Jabril, like, you know, in those first couple of years, because the first 2 years are extremely important to be able to rewire his brain. Wow. And she worked extremely hard, and, you know, thank God, you know, he's doing all of these things that they said that he'd never be able to do. So yeah, he's been a major drive for me, man, as a parent, like, just but he also brings like a certain like happiness to the family, and not just to us, like to our whole extended family. And I'm not just talking about like my immediate family. I'm talking about whether it's my cousins, whether like, because they see this kid and they're like, this kid, they know that how sick he was. They know how bad, like they know that he's got cerebral palsy, but like to see what he's able to do, it's like, it's heartwarming, man.
Yeah.
Like, and he just brings so much happiness to everybody, and everybody loves the kid like so much. And even just today, to be honest with you, he walked in the house, and Nicole's like, oh, look at Blippy, what's Blippy doing? And he's like, he's got a boat, mum. And like, just him saying those words, man, like meant something to me.
Yeah.
Like just that. And then I was like, Jabril, close the door. And he's like, no. And then Nicole's like, look, he's snapping at you. And I'm like, I know, but like, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like I'm so appreciative of everything that he can do, because this is everything that they told us that he can't do. All of the things that, you know, now he's bouncing basketballs around.
Yeah.
And he's bouncing his basketball around better than what my daughter can do it.
Wow.
You know, and he's shooting hoops.
Yep.
And he's swimming, and he's doing like all of these amazing things that they said that wasn't possible.
Yeah.
You know, they told us, like I said, 4.5 hours to live. Like, who would think that a kid that had 4.5 hours to live could do all of these things? So I'm always grateful, and I always put my head down on the floor and thank God for that. Because, you know, like, and it's given us a real sense of purpose of what we want to achieve as parents. And I know my wife feels like she's got a lot more purpose in her life now.
Yep.
In like her main objective in life is to help Jibby.
Yeah.
Like that's her biggest thing. And that some people might think that, oh, but you know, how about herself? Like, and she does not care. Yeah. I know I can genuinely feel like she'll put that boy before herself, which any mother would do, really.
Of course.
I know that, like, she chases that kid around like anything. Like, she chases him around everywhere. Like, before she's even put food in her mouth, like, all she's ever worried about is feeding Jabril and making sure that Jabril is growing and you know, his muscles are developing, and you know, taking him to all of his, like, I'm so grateful to her for all that she does, like, with that sort of stuff, man. Like, obviously I'm heavily focused on my career, but if she wasn't there to be able to help him, and like, I don't know, like, if I would even be able to put as much effort, because I know that I need to look after my boy.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, so
well, there's, you know, and that's one of the things that, you know, when people sort of go away from this idea of a traditional relationship, so to speak, but everybody has a role to play.
Definitely.
And just because they're different roles don't mean that they're not equal.
Nah.
They're equally as important as each other. They're just in different things. You know, I say the same thing about my wife. Like, if she didn't support the things that I do, I wouldn't be able to, you know, do all the podcasts and all of these things that I try and put together. And, you know, there's been points where she's also questioned, oh, you know, what's the purpose of all this, right? Like, she's asked that at certain points. And I feel like, you know, she's come around a lot more, having listened to a lot more of the episodes and some of the topics that come up and the things that we cover. And, you know, people that listen, you know, like, sometimes they'll give her feedback, and they'll go, oh, you know, I'm very impressed by this or that, and I love this episode, or I love that episode. And I think that's helped her to see where some of the value in what I do has helped. I want to go back to the Cerebral Palsy Alliance thing, right? So, what, out of curiosity, so that, I guess, you know, because there might be people that are going through something similar or whatever, like, what is the kind of support that they provide, and what do they do?
Well, the main support at the start was that before we had funding from NDIS, they were good enough to like support us by using fundraising money to help Jabril with his appointments.
Ah, okay.
So, like, at that time, where obviously we weren't in the sort of financial position to be able to pay for all of his therapies,
you
know, which obviously we're so blessed to be in a country that does provide, you know, like at the NDIS, things like that. That was like, for me, that was the biggest thing that they did early, was that, okay, they used fundraising money to give our son an opportunity at early intervention. And then, you know, once we had aligned ourselves with them, so they have basically therapists, physiotherapists, they have occupational therapists, they have speech therapists, they have like all these different types of people who come together who work under this alliance. And it's all in-house, like it's all in the one spot. So like, you know, Jabril would have an occupational therapy session once every 2 weeks, you know, physiotherapy once every week, and speech therapy maybe once every week or once every fortnight, for example.
Yep.
And Nicole would just have to take him there to his appointments. Okay. And it was a long time before I even allowed myself to go, because at the start, you know, once they said that Jabril had cerebral palsy, that was sort of hard for me to accept, because I was just like, look, I heard these guys, the same guys, say that Jabril was going to go on in 4.5 hours. Yeah. So it's not so much like, oh, nah, my son doesn't have it, but it was more like, my son's going to be okay. Yeah. But that mindset was, like, reflecting on it, was the wrong mindset, because my wife was like, okay, don't worry, you be like that, but I'm going to go take him. I'm going to deal with it. Yeah. I'm going to take him, you know? So it was actually quite a few months, maybe could have even been like closer to a year, that I hadn't even been to one of those sessions. Yeah. And I remember when it eventually hit me that, like, okay, so Jabril's definitely got cerebral palsy, because he was still young, you know, like he was still young. So like if he couldn't do this or that or whatever, I'm like, I'd always relay it to the fact that he was born prematurely. Yeah. But then once the sort of realization kicked in that, okay, Jabril does have cerebral palsy, I remember it just hitting me, not because he has cerebral palsy, but just because I allowed my wife to deal with it mainly on her own. Yeah. And like anytime that she would try to talk to me about it, I'd be like, I don't want to hear it. Yeah. I don't speak this stuff into existence. So once that hit me, man, that hit me like a ton of bricks, to be honest. But then, like, once I eventually went and visited the Cerebral Palsy Alliance and took Jabril to his appointments and realized that, okay, like look at these people that don't even know my son really from a bar of soap, but they love the kid. Yeah. Because, you know, of his energy, because of his infectious nature. And they're like doing whatever they can to help this kid thrive in life and to be able to do things that, you know, and then you look around and see other children there that have a more severe case of cerebral palsy, that are wheelchair bound, and that are, you know, some of them are in, like, basically, if I can say it, is like Stephen Hawking state. Yeah. You know, and just then to look at that and just be like, wow, like, what do I have to complain about? Like, what is there for me to be so worried about for Jabril? Like, when he can walk, when, you know, even though he was using, for example, at the start, he was using a walking frame to walk. And, you know, just seeing him use that, and then, but eventually he just left the walking frame and just started walking by himself. I was like, wow. Like, just, and obviously that all comes from God. Yeah. Because without God, that's not possible. But God, gives us tools to be able to, for that to be able to happen. You know, without God, those tools aren't there. But, you know, to see that the work that the physiotherapists had put in, the occupational therapists, that the speech therapist, for Jabril to be able to, like I said, not only count to 10, but then count from 10 back down to 1. Yeah. It's like my daughter, like I said, there's certain things that Jabril was doing that my daughter couldn't even do. And it would amaze us. Yeah. And everything would amaze us. So, like, the people at Cerebral Palsy Alliance, man, like, anybody who works in that sort of field, like, you know that they've got a special part of them. Like, there's just this real special streak within them. Yeah. That they want to help people that are, you know, whether a bit less able, or people that, you know, a lot of people will just sort of forget about, to be honest. Like, that's the thing. And I just want my son to always know that doesn't matter what he wants to do in life, it's possible for him, man, because, like, he's already beat the odds. Yeah, living proof already. So much, man. Like, he's already beat the odds over and over and over again. And yeah, it's an amazing feeling, man. I always I use this sort of analogy, you know, no matter how good a person's life looks from the outside, it's like, you know, like, there's these old computer games where, you know, you'd have to make your character, and, like, it'll be like,
you click the button and it'll like roll the dice on all your traits.
Yeah.
You know, what's your strength, what's your intelligence, what's your constitution, wisdom, all this sort of stuff. Give you all these different numbers. But no matter how many times you re-rolled, you never get a perfect one, right? Like it was always, this guy's a bit stronger, or this guy's a bit smarter, or whatever the case may be. And that's life, right? 100%. Like that's everybody in life. That, you know, when we're born into this world, we get given these set of attributes that you can wish your best to try and change, but you're born with those. But then there's things that you can develop. The skill side of it, you can keep developing, and you can develop, like, build skills that will complement those attributes. But, you know, sometimes some people start, you know, with a bit more of a head start. Some people start a little bit behind.
Yeah.
But even if you start behind, you know, God gives you things that will make up for those things later.
Always, man.
You know,
and that's the thing. Like with Jibril, like, his legs might not be the strongest, but wow, his upper body, my gosh, like he'll be able to like do a chin up off the kitchen bench, for example, or like he'll be able to lift something up, and you know, like I said, man, just we appreciate anything that he does.
Yeah.
And Aaliyah might do the same thing, but like we don't appreciate it as much. Like that's the truth, because like we're like, oh, okay, because it's normal. Aaliyah will be able to do it. It's regular for her.
Yeah.
But then when Jibril does it, it's like, wow, we get so excited about it. It's made us appreciate the little things with him, man. And I think like it's held us in good stead as parents, that we're like, you know, and if God blesses us with another child, and, you know, hopefully we can stay as mindful and be as grateful for everything that, you know, just the regular things, like a child who's able to walk without, you know, assistance, and a child who's able to basically develop in a normal sort of state, you know, in a regular state. So, like whatever it is, man, like, and I know that as parents, that if you can sort of accept that and work through that, like we'll be able to work through anything that life throws at us, God willing, you know. That's a big thing for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful blessing as well, in that sense that, you know, these things, they can only go one of two ways. They're either going to bring you together, or they're going to pull you apart. Yeah. And the fact that you two can use it to draw yourselves together and become closer as a family, and you see the beauty in it, and you see you know, I think that's a beautiful thing. There's many people with like happy and healthy kids, but they spend all day long buried in their phones and doing these other things and not appreciating the...
Yeah, that's not to say that we're perfect either.
Of course not.
You know, we're not perfect, and we deal with our own challenges, and, you know, there's different frustration levels that, you know, sometimes hit. And like I said earlier, you know, I wasn't sort of as involved at the start as I feel like I should have been. And you know, like that was a regret that I had, but she was good enough to like just realize that, like, okay, he's just dealing with it in his own way. You know, it was my own way of dealing with it. And I remember her telling me, like, it's okay, Uwee, it's gonna hit you soon, but, you know, like it'll hit you soon, you know, like I know it hasn't hit you yet, but it'll hit you soon. And I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Doesn't that frustrate you? It's like your wives will tell you things, and they're like, "I told you this a long time ago."
She didn't hit me with that. I told you so. Like once it did hit me, and she just sort of helped me get through it, and just basically said to me, "Look, it's fine. Like look at him. He's doing really well anyway. You know, like." And I knew that you weren't the best at dealing with it, which is why I did what I needed to do, you know, which was get him to all of his sessions. Like, if it was up to me, maybe he wouldn't have gone to all of his sessions. You know, even though they were there and the availability was there. But yeah, now for us as parents, man, like, I'd love to be able to use sort of our experiences to help other parents who are dealing with the same sort of thing. And, you know, whether it's through writing, or like I've been writing a few blogs, or whether it's, you know, just eventually, like my idea is that once I've built enough of a platform through boxing, like I'd love to start a foundation that can help parents who sort of deal with premature children. Yep. Because it's pretty tough, man. Like it's a hard thing to, especially if you've got other kids. And we were lucky with Aaliyah. We had access to my mum and dad, and so we had the support network that, you know, if we needed to go to the hospital for whatever reason, like we could just leave Aaliyah there, because it was during the COVID pandemic as well. So Jibril was born at that time. So it was really tough to take children to the hospital and stuff at that time. we're pretty lucky, man. So if we could sort of help other parents that are going through the same thing, then that's another purpose in life that I'd love to fulfill.
Yep. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to ask about this because, you know, obviously from the boxing side, you would have seen your brother Billy go through a whole bunch of different things, right? And you know, throughout his career, and I guess, and I'm more interested in, I guess, your perspective on it all, right? Seeing him go, you know, through the highs and through the lows, and I guess more specifically on the boxing side of things. Like, what were some of the lessons that you took away from, you know, Billy's career and some of those things, and seeing him go through some of those, obviously the highs as well as the lows?
One of the biggest things that I took out was learning not to fall in love with anybody in the game of boxing. like that was real. Because Bill's got that's Billy's personality. Is that once he takes a liking to somebody, he really takes a liking to him, and you know, like he'll sort of become best friends with them. So I remember, you know, like at the time he was with Golden Boy Promotions. You know, he signed with them after I think 15 or 16 pro fights. Like he became in love with that whole crew. You know, Oscar De La Hoya, Shane Mosley. It was mainly Shane Mosley, but you know, it wasn't until he took a loss and they were trying to throw him in hard fights and fights that like basically feeding him to the wolves.
Yep.
And then, you know, him coming out of his contract, it was like, okay, these guys don't really care about you.
Yeah.
The only time boxing people care about you is when you're winning.
Yep.
And then other than that, like it's only a team that you can rely on, you know, which is your core team, you know, whether it be your manager, your trainer, and your basically your support people in the gym. Yep. That was probably the biggest thing, and just learning how to deal with emotions, learning how to deal with pressures, learning how to deal with, you know, like that pre-fight build up, all of that. Like I learned a lot just watching Billy. I didn't necessarily have to go through it on my own. Yeah. I could take it away from just watching how he was, or like early on in his career when he'd get bagged on, like back in those days there was like boxing forums. Yeah. You know? and it wasn't like, you know, obviously social media wasn't as big as what it is now. Yep. So, and he'd get on those boxing forums and he'd have a read about everything that people were writing about him, whether it's good or whether it's bad, and it would really get to him. It's like, I'd never let that happen to me. Yeah. I remember growing up and I used to say to him, I'm like, Bill, why do you care, bro? And he'd tell me like, I don't care, but I could see how bad it was affecting him because you're reading it. Like if you really didn't care, you wouldn't read it. Yep. So I was sort of, I learned how to deal with that. And, you know, I was like, okay, I'm not going to, like, why would I care about a couple of people who are writing on a computer who would never even be able to step into a boxing ring? Yeah. Like, why would I care about what they write? So stuff like that. And then, you know, watching Billy sort of, you know, go through his promotional troubles with 50 Cent as well. Again, he sort of fell in love with the whole 50 Cent sort of thing. And, you know, like trusted him when really he shouldn't have trusted him. And just to see how 50 Cent sort of stuffed him around before one of his biggest fights. Yeah, you sort of learn, okay, like it's just business at the end of the day. Yeah. That's all it is, man. It's business. Yeah. So you can't. When you're winning, they all come. That's it, man. That's the thing. You can't take what people say as gospel, bro. Like you need to just understand that people have hidden agendas that you never really understand. So like you got to look at it with a bigger picture. Like, yeah. So do you find that? And this is something that I always say to, you know, any aspiring athlete that wants to compete and things like that. You like the more events you go to, even if you're not competing, but being at the events helps you to gain experience, right? Because especially if, like, you know, if you're going to watch one of your friends fight or something like that, and you get to see, you know, they're in the back getting their hands wrapped or getting prepared and all these sorts of things. You get to see what they go through mentally. Then when you're in the crowd and you're watching people make the walk, right? You see them get into the ring. Like you're getting this
almost like this vicarious experience of what that person's going through.
It's like a passive experience.
A passive experience, right? But I feel like those sorts of experiences actually help athletes as well. Like I feel like, you know, for you, having been around and seeing Billy go through those things, and also the other boxers in the gym as well, right? Do you find that helps, you know, with the experience factor? Like it makes you, I guess it's like, you know, the way I would word is like, you know what's going to happen, right? You've seen it, you've seen the walk being made so many times, you've seen other people go through it so many times that you know what to expect.
Yeah, you do. But at the same time, man, until you go through it by yourself, like on your own, like you definitely learn how to deal with it. And like, you know, whether it be taking certain techniques that you saw worked for them, you know, whether it be breathing techniques or whether it be, you know, visualization or whatever it is. But until you go through it by yourself, you don't really learn how to, like, because everybody's different, you know? So for me, yeah, as much as I had watched my brother make that walk as many times as he did, like it still took some time for me to be completely comfortable and just realize, okay, this is where I need to slow my breathing down. This is where I don't need to think about it. Like everybody's got sort of different things. So some people would think about the fight. Like a lot of people ask me on the fight day, are you pumped? Like, you know, and it's 9 a.m. and I'm not going to be fighting till 9 p.m. I'm like, nah, I'm not pumped.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, I'll get pumped when I've got like maybe an hour before the fight that I know that, okay, this is the time to use that energy, because if I'm pumped now at 9 a.m.
You'd be gassed.
Yeah, like it's how long can you be pumped for? You know, so you learn how to deal with it through your own sort of experiences at the same time. But yeah, like being at certain events, like I don't go to a lot of boxing events myself, like that don't involve our team. Yep. I prefer not to. Like I prefer to watch it on TV or whatever. But obviously, yeah, sometimes you can sort of see an atmosphere or deal with like, but unless you're the person in the arena, then it doesn't really count. Like, you know, like if you, for example, Tim Zoo's fight night the other night. Yep. That would have been an amazing experience, yes. But would I have gotten something out of being there other than feeling, oh, wow, what an amazing atmosphere? No. I got something more out of me being in a smaller atmosphere that I was in, like in my fight. Like I got a lot more out of that. Yeah, because I'm going through it personally on my on my own accord. Yeah, no, you definitely, obviously when you're in the ring yourself, you're gonna get the most growth. But I think, you know, just from that nerves factor in terms of, okay, what's going on? Yeah, what's happening? Learning how to deal with certain situations. Yeah, you definitely, like you can learn. Like it's like me having so many older siblings. I've learned how to deal with certain mistakes without having to go through it myself. You know, whether it be marital or whether it be financial or whatever it is. Yeah. So then, when you reflect back on some of the people that you've come up against, and especially the tough fights, right? How have you sort of like come to peace with, I guess, you know, how those fights are played out, and I guess how you want to turn that into something for you to then, as motivation for you to improve, or like, I guess, how do you approach that? Because, you know, you fought some big names when you were in your amateur career. Yeah, amateur, like, I think, like, if I can know that each time that I fight that I'm adding something to my performance, or that I'm like so, for example, the last one, how relaxed I was, like that's something that I'll take out of it. And, you know, and then at the same time I could take out of it that I kept my head in situations where I could have easily lost my head, or I had an excuse to lose my head, whether it be, you know, getting hit after the bell, or getting my ear bit, or whatever it was. Just pause there for 1 second. So I do need to say this. So for those people who want to check out Uwee's last fight, it's on Combatants. So www.combatants.com with a K, and check it out, because it was I thought this was it was a great fight. First of all, you get to hear my commentary. That's another bonus. But, you know, like it was a real clash in terms of styles. So when I say that, Kai, you know, was coming off a little bit of a layoff. You know, he's got a couple of belts behind him, and his energy was very, very. I guess in the lead up, I was expecting an aggressive energy, but it was almost like watching pro wrestling, in the sense of like he was playing the perfect bad guy. He was the antagonist. He was the antagonist, you know, and he was playing that character so well. And I know partially, you know,
there's always mind games in the sport, right? And I know partially it was that mind game to try and throw you off balance as well, because he was probably thinking, okay, it's a dangerous fight from your perspective if he can get you to play his game and want to just bang, right? But it's a dangerous fight from his perspective if you stay cold and calculated and you dance around him and you outbox him all night.
Yeah.
So that was the interesting dynamic that I think is really worthwhile for people to check out. And I think it was a fun fight. Like
it was.
It
was, and the atmosphere was amazing.
Yeah.
And like you said, he played the perfect antagonist, and he basically he reveled in the fact that that the whole crowd was against him.
Yeah.
Like it was like he fed off it.
Yeah.
And like he like you said, he tried everything that he could to get me off of my game plan, and I think he sort of realized that, okay, like Uwee's probably the better boxer between us two, but he was a better fighter, so to speak, like on the inside, and if I was to brawl with him, then it could have allowed him, because he has heavy hands, it could have allowed him a better chance at winning the fight. So he tried to do that, and that's what a competitor does, but does that mean I condone the fact that he hit me after the bell and that he bit my ear in order to make that happen? No, but it is what it is. Like, and he was grabbing me and saying some things in my ear and calling me a bitch and whatever else. But I kept it cool. I knew what he was trying to do. Even at the weigh-in the day before, he actually got quite racial.
Yeah.
And then sort of vilified me, and the religion and things like that. And I remember driving home, and it wasn't an emotion of, I can't wait to get my hands on this guy and I'm going to smash his head in or whatever. It was more like, okay, look how desperate this guy is.
Yeah.
He's very desperate for me to get out of my game plan. So, here's what you're going to do. You're going to stay switched on. You're going to stay smart. You're going to stay focused throughout the whole fight, win the fight. And he who laughs last, laughs hardest.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think he's I can't remember who he's matched up next against, but he's got a fight coming up as well. But you're also on the prowl looking for something, or is there something in negotiations at the moment?
Something that is in negotiations at the moment, and it's pretty exciting. And obviously with boxing, nothing happens until it happens.
Yep.
A lot of the time, unless you're in the actual boxing ring, you don't know that you're actually going to fight. But there's definitely some exciting things coming up, and my backers and my my supporters have got something in line, man. So definitely exciting. So hopefully once it's official, everybody will sort of know about it, and I'm preparing as if it's already in the works, and or as if it's already on. So just preparing and ready and waiting for this announcement to come in, and then once it's there, like it obviously just brings a different level of excitement, and you just know. But like right now, I have not a certain date, but a time frame that I'm aiming towards, and just working towards that at the moment.
Out of curiosity, because boxing is very different to MMA from that perspective, I'm a little bit curious about promoter dynamics. Because obviously promoters are all looking to get their piece of the pie and work out what's best and all that sort of stuff. I guess I'm guessing you probably don't get involved in that side of it, right? Like you sort of just try and stay out and focus on the boxing. Or
like I've always my whole career I've not really asked too many questions, but now I'm sort of at that point of my career that I'm like, okay, like I need something more, where I need more exposure. I need I'm ready for the next level. I never sort of got too ahead of myself, when I was a bit younger, going through the motions of the sport, which is learning my trade and whatever. But now that I feel like I'm at a certain level and I know what I'm doing around the ring, and I know that I'm capable of beating, some good names and things like that, I'm ready to basically take it up a notch. So I'm I've been actively asking for these opportunities now. So now, man, just leave it in the hands of the managers and stuff like that, man, and just go from there, bro. Go from there.
Yeah, it's always funny, because we're operating in this space where it's a blurred line between sports and entertainment. People love the storylines, right? And there's some, there's plenty of great storylines, but it's about who's gonna bite. Who's gonna actually sign on the line.
Yeah. Look, in terms of getting aligned to promoters and stuff, like there's so much more that needs to happen than like what meets the eye.
Yeah.
Like there's so much more. Like you guys need to align in terms of what your vision for your career is.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, like for the major promoters, they don't really care what your vision is. They only care about what is going to be beneficial for them, what's going to be beneficial for the content that they're putting out.
Yeah.
You know, for the TV networks and things like that.
Yep.
So, you know, they might have an idea of like, you're going to fight these guys in the division.
Yep.
You're like, okay, but these guys aren't the best fights for me right now. You know, they're not the most attractive style fights. They're not the most, you know, because it's not about not wanting to fight a certain person because you're worried about getting beat. But it's more worried about, okay, like this guy's style is going to make me look terrible. Like it's going to make me look like you can't look good against a person like that.
Yeah. Just the way that they make it, make it into an ugly fight.
Just the way that they fight.
Yep.
You can't even look good against them. And then people watch that and they're like, oh. Whereas if you fought a different sort of style and your two styles meshed better, and then it becomes an entertaining fight where people are like, okay, I want to watch the guy again. But they don't always think like that, promoters. They just think, okay, this guy's got a good record, this guy's got a good record, it looks good matchup on paper, it's going to make a good matchup.
Well, that's like what I said about your fight with Kai, is that I don't, you know, even though Kai lost the fight, I don't think his stock is necessarily diminished because it was an entertaining fight.
Yeah.
It was a good fight.
Yeah.
You know, so from that perspective, it's a win-win for both fighters.
Well, really, he was going up against a guy who was already 18 wins and no losses. And,
Yep.
you know, obviously I hadn't really had any major step-up fights. You know, there was probably one or two fights that were, you know, at a good level, but the rest were sort of learning fights and learning my trade during that time. And I'm the first to admit that. But I know that when I'm ready to step up, like I know that when it comes time to step up, I'm ready to fight at that level because I've done that in my amateur career. I've done that throughout my pro career as well.
Yep.
So this was one of the times that, you know, where people thought that, okay, Kai McKenzie's the favourite. And I felt like I dealt with him, you know, pretty handily. I didn't, you know, sort of, I'll be real, man. Like, I don't even know what the hell one of the judges was thinking by scoring that as close as he was. Because I remember walking back to the corner and asking my trainer, I was like, bro, what do you reckon? 8-2, 7-3?
Yeah.
And he's like, bro, 9-1 or 10-zip. You know, I was like, oh, like, and I understand that it was a bit competitive at certain times, but at the same time, like I landed a lot cleaner shots, made him miss a lot more, you know, sort of did what I
set out to do
best, you know, like did what I do best. So I know that I'm ready for that next level of fighters now because Kai's been around. He's had a decent amateur background and he's fought in some big fights as a professional and fought on some of the major cards and stuff like that. So his experience was something that we couldn't, you know, just overlook.
Of course not. Yeah. All right. I think that's a beautiful place to sort of leave this. If people want to find you, how do they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Uwee_Dib.
Yep.
And I'm on Instagram at Uwee_Dib as well. So, yeah, man, follow the journey, get behind us. And other than that, man, just get behind whoever you can really as a professional fighter. Man, it's not the easiest career and it's not the most financially rewarding career. But we're all doing it for it because we have a purpose in mind, which is to try and get to the very top.
Yep.
And only a very small percentage of fighters are going to get to the top. But you've got to commend their willingness to put themselves out there in that public sphere and in that space. And it's a hard place to be in.
Absolutely.
It's the ring, man.
Yeah.
So you just respect all fighters. That's pretty much it.
That's it. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Johnny.